Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so pleased to welcome you to our event today. My name is Natalie Renew, and I'm the Director of Homegrown, and I am joined by my colleagues Karen Tylek and Vinette Pierre from the Homegrown team. Before I introduce this event, I want to acknowledge today is the one-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. We are holding his daughter, his family, and friends and our communities in our hearts today, and we appreciate you spending this time with us today. The purpose of this event is to celebrate children's literature and this amazing book, Oscar's Tower of Flowers, and a book that centers the experience of a young child and his relative caregiver, his Nana. And beyond this, we are excited to talk with two coaches who have supported relative caregivers in building early literacy and using this book and others like it. I'll share a couple of housekeeping updates, and then we will dive in. This is a 45-minute event, and this event is being recorded. Everybody has been put on mute, and we really encourage you to share your reflections, your feelings, and your questions in the chat or the Q&A. We should have some time towards the end to take some questions. For all providers, home-based childcare providers that registered for today's event, you may have already received your copy of the book, and if not, you will receive that copy shortly. We are so pleased to be presenting this event today in collaboration with two of our partners. Vinette, can we please go to the next slide? We're so pleased to be joined today by our partners, the Bookvine and Parent Child Plus, who are presenting this event with us today. We will hear from, and I will introduce you to representatives of those organizations throughout today's agenda. So I'm going to share in our next slide, please, what we hope to accomplish today with you. Next slide, please. We will take a few minutes to hear from our friends at the Bookvine and to meet the author of this book. We will then transition and spend some time talking with Monica and Jen around their experiences coaching relative caregivers in Philadelphia. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Isabel Baker, the founding director of the Bookvine, and Amy Vandement, the president of Bookvine, to introduce our author for this book.
Well, thank you, Natalie. I'm Amy Vandement, president of the Bookvine for Children. And if you're not familiar with us, we're a 40-year-old independently owned book business. We're so glad to be here today. And we've gotten to know Homegrown and PC Plus in the past few months. And when the preview copy of Oscar's Tower of Flowers came across our desks, we instantly thought of Natalie Renew, and thus this project was born. I'm so pleased to introduce the video of Lauren Tabia, author and illustrator of this wordless book. We contacted Lauren, and she was so generous to create this video, especially for this project. She's British, and in the video, she addresses her concern over her accent. I'm sure you'll have no trouble understanding her. She's lovely and exceptionally talented. So, on to Lauren.
Hello everyone from Vine. My name's Lauren Tabia, and I'm speaking to you all the way from sunny Bristol. So I apologise if you probably need subtitles now. I'll try and speak clearly, but I've got a really thick Bristolian accent. So that strange noise, that's my accent, I'm sorry. So the first thing I suppose I'm talking about is my book, Oscar's Tower of Flowers. And that's obviously coming out, and I'm very excited to share it with you. So I think the first time, what kicked it all off, the story, was that I found out I was going to be a grandma for the first time. So that was a huge thing, and I wanted to make him a present, really, I suppose, a reminder. So I started off just sort of scribbling in a book. And this is Oscar's Tower of Flowers as it started. This is how you work with a sketchbook. Basically, I just put in all the ideas that I had, and it got more and more scruffy and more weird, and more things started happening, and pages fell out. And eventually I got a text. Well, I submitted a text to the publisher, which is the words obviously, and we looked at it and they said, why not take the words out? Actually, the story works without words. So I thought it was a really good idea. So I started making it almost like a comic book. So piecing the story together and trying to do it visually. It was complicated and there's lots of drawing, but it was fun, and it was lovely to see what I could put in the story that didn't need words. I suppose with every every piece of work you do, it brings in the things that you're interested in, and I didn't realise I was so obsessed about certain things until I started making the book, and I realised I was completely nuts on houseplants. I mean, I have got a houseplant business, a very small one. In fact, I've got a little market stall in Bristol where I sell houseplants. So yeah, they were everywhere, so they tend to be part of the story. I think it's quite funny that although this is a wordless book and it doesn't tell you very much, I've got a huge land here inside the book of people I know, who they are, what they're doing, who knows what they're going to do next. I suppose the main theme of the book is something that I'm quite passionate about, is that people from somewhere else will often come to a place with fresh eyes, and I think Oscar comes to his granny's house and sees that the plant isn't doing well and somehow changes where he is. So, you know, the tower block originally is quite functional. There are lots of people doing their thing, but they're not talking to each other, and they're all just getting on with their lives. But once he starts growing all these plants and sharing them with other people, that brings people together and changes the dynamic of the tower block and starts people talking to each other. So the end papers are basically the whole story. The very functional house building, with everyone just doing their thing. And then the second one is the building community, having all the plants about, people talking to each other because of them, and it's a catalyst that makes people come together and work together. I think sometimes it's useful to have, or fun to have, an animal in any of my books, because although they're not saying anything, they're just watching and maybe just reacting to what's going on. And I used to have a cat called Spike, who when I was a kid, and that's the cat that's in there. He's black and white in real life, but now he's blue because this is a children's book and I can choose to have a blue cat if I want. It's taken about 3 years from scribbling in my notebook to talking to publishers, to making the pages, and to get it ready for print. And right in the middle of it, the pandemic hit, and that sort of changed some of the tone of it, I think, or changed some of my thoughts about it. Spent a long time looking at it and thinking, gosh, yes, we're really lucky to have people around us, and to have a community, and how important that is. And I think I didn't want to put too much about it in there, but I did put a little rainbow in one of the windows, so you can see if you can find it. I suppose I should explain that, because in the UK, a lot of people made things to put in their windows because we weren't speaking to each other anymore. A lot of people put pictures in their windows, and one of the recurring themes was a rainbow, which basically said, you know, the rain happens and then the sunshine comes again. Like tower blocks, I think they're fascinating. I love the way that there are loads of different people all living on top of each other and next to each other in the same building, but not necessarily knowing each other. And if you look at one house or one big tower, there are so many stories that are going on in each level and each story. Hello, this is me and my desk. So I spend a lot of my day just drawing in my sketchbook. I use mostly a very fine pencil, and then I scan it into my computer, and then I work on it on my iPad normally to put the colours in. I get the colours first off from using watercolours and things like that, but once you're making a book, I tend to work on the computer. I also drink a lot of tea and I play with my phone. Yeah. So once I've done the drawings and scanned them in, I tend to work on the colours, particularly for sort of finished artwork. I tend to work on the computer. So at the moment I'm working on an iPad using Procreate, which is a sort of drawing tool. And so if I take all the layers down, you can see the original line drawing. Yep, there we go. So that's my original line drawing, as I've done before. And then I fill in colours and things as I go. So here we go, and I'll put some red dots on his little top. Or I can get it right. There we go. So I can just start putting the dots on, which is quite fun. And then, as you can see, they don't really have to go over the lines because I just change the level to multiply and then rub out the bits that I don't want. So it starts to look like he's got a little woolly dressing going on. It's the little things when you're illustrating that are really quite satisfying. It's like I put my cat in there again. I was talking about it earlier, the cat called Spike that I had when I was a kid, except this one's black and white, but he's in the pocket of a little child character. Rubber ducks are always good. I enjoy doing rubber ducks. I'll just put the colours back in and you can see how all the layers come together. So yeah, that's how the drawings are made into. Here are some shots of my studio, and you can tell what a mess it is. I keep thinking that I'm going to tidy it up, but never happens. So my name's Lauren Tobia, and I've lived in Bristol all my life, except for a very short period when I didn't, but long story. I've lived in the same little area for many, many years. Oh, and it says in my biography that I live in a tiny house. Now, I think there's a clarification. I don't live in like one of them cart things with wheels. I live in just a small house. I live with my husband, and we've been together for eons. So I'm now officially a nana, which I'm enjoying a lot, and it's very handy because my daughter and her family live in just behind that wall there, so I can hear him, Oscar, when he's charging about the garden shouting. So I've always been a drawer. I've always been fairly creative, but I didn't go to art college until I was 40. So there's hope out there for anyone who wants to get into adult education. I recommend it. It's much more fun. Before that, I had a career as a nurse, and I worked as an intensive care nurse for 10 years. I was a nurse for about 25 years altogether. But, you know, things change. So why children's illustration? It's a difficult one, really. I think I've always, all my work just seems to look like children's illustration. Even when I was supposedly doing edgy things, they ended up just looking silly and funny. It's always been my humour and my take on things to be a little bit childish, really, I think. Since I left college, I've been lucky enough to work with some amazing writers on some lovely books. Probably most well known for Happy in My Skin by Fran Minushkin, and the Anna Hibiscus series, which has been like a constant for years now. I started off straight from college doing the first Anna Hibiscus books, the fiction titles, and have continued to illustrate them right through to picture books. But this is my first book that has come straight from my head, and it means a lot to me. You did ask me what my favourite cake was, and I'd say the one next to me on a plate, because I love cake. I'm particularly fond of Dayton walnut. I like loads of cakes with nuts in, but my husband hates nuts and he gets very cross if I produce nut cakes.
I think I can go. Okay.
Go ahead, Isabel.
All right. Thank you, Lauren Tabia. She is a delight. I'm Isabel Baker, the founding director of the Book Vine for Children. And it's been my passion and my pleasure and privilege to work with teachers and connect them to quality children's books for over 40 years now. And working with Homegrown has been a unique experience to get to know some organizations that do this important work of supporting home-based child care centers and providers. So just a few notes about Oscar's Tower of Flowers. As Lauren mentioned, it's a wordless book. And wordless books offer great opportunity for the providers and for the children. It's very good for different age groups all at once. And you can just talk about what's going on in the pictures. If you have the children talk about the pictures, they'll point out different things, and you get to know children in a whole different way, what they're thinking. And there's no right or wrong. And like all quality children's books, there's different layers. They don't just fit into one category or another. So this book has racial diversity. It has fathers as caregivers. It has single mothers. It has giving to others. It has, I grew up in an apartment, so I always appreciate books. She calls them towers, but that's the British word for apartment buildings. But I always appreciate books that portray apartment buildings because there aren't a lot of children's books that do that. And it's about community, what happens when the whole community gets together. So we're very happy that Homegrown and her partner there decided to send hardcover books to all of you. That is a real treat. And we feel fortunate to be able to be a part of this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel and Amy, and to Lauren for sharing her process and her life with us. This book is just really an incredible joy. So we're going to transition now and meet Monica and Jen and talk a little bit about their experience supporting relative caregivers in Philadelphia. So I'm really pleased to introduce you to Monica Allison, who is the site coordinator for Parent Child Plus in Philadelphia, and Jennifer Moore, who is an early learning specialist in Philadelphia. And I thought we could start out with Monica just sharing a little bit of background on Parent Child Plus and how you all work. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you again, Natalie, for inviting us to speak. So Parent Child Plus is a more than 50-year-old organization, and it's been through several reiterations. Originally, the premise, which actually still exists, is that we reach children at a young age and increase parent-child interactions. And you can change the trajectory of these children by doing that. So we took that ideology and applied it to caregivers like the one that you're going to see or talk about today. And so we serve not only parents on a one-to-one with their children, but relative neighbor providers, as well as registered family and group providers that serve children within our community. And our model is really built on coaching and that interaction that what we try to do is to help those caregivers to see their strengths and then take those strengths and build on it to lift children's school readiness skills and help them to be ready to thrive and not just survive. And this is done through play and literacy, bringing no-cost books and educational toys into the home. And we use those no-cost gifts to increase school readiness skills and success through play and play-driven activities that would be around these books and toys. And it also allows those caregivers and parents, when we do our one-on-one program, to have a learning-rich home. And support our children in their social emotional skills and get them ready to enter school. So the tagline for Parent Child Plus is equal possibilities from the start. But what I say is equitable possibilities, because equal means that everybody's on the same playing field, but equity means that we meet them where they are and try to bring them forward. And we use those free gifts and toys and the coaching model to be able to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Monica, for giving us a little bit more background about Parent Child Plus. Jen, who is joining us today, had the opportunity to receive the book and to share it with a caregiver in West Philadelphia named Mrs. Ward. And Jen, I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about how this experience went, how, maybe you can start out by sharing a little bit about Mrs. Ward and the children she cares for, and how her and her kids interacted with the book.
Hi, I'm Jennifer McDuffie Moore. I'm the early learning specialist and I worked with Miss Ward. So a little bit about Miss Ward. Miss Ward is in her 60s. She has 6 children under the age of, I think the oldest is 11 now. So she's pretty busy. The pandemic hit and she was like, what am I going to do? So she was always keeping the kids engaged, and she loves books and she loves reading. So the Oscar book was great because when I came to visit, she kind of had them all set up to read. She wanted them, she's like, okay, this is going to be organized. But I said, Miss Ward, it doesn't have to be. She's like, no, I really want them to get this because she's amazing. And I like how Monica said we use their strengths, and Miss Ward knows how important literacy is. And all the children, except for the youngest, he's only 2, are amazing readers. So the Oscar book, Miss Ward didn't believe me that there wasn't any words. And it was really funny because she's like, wait, this really doesn't have any words. And the kids are like, no, we're making the words. So I really like that she has working with her during the year. I've been with her a year and a couple months just about, and she really has learned to value not just what the book says, but asking open-ended questions and, you know, talking about the illustrations. And a book isn't just a quick read anymore. She really engages the children and she really loves to read with them, even if they are, you know, making up silly words or it doesn't go with the pictures. But she cares for the children. Pretty much she's been their round the clock caregiver since the pandemic has started. Her number could go up, it could go down, but she keeps at least 5 children in her home. And she's like the Nana that the author talked about. Like, children come and they stay, and her house is a safe place. She's also a foster parent, and she's had, I don't even know how many children she's cared for, but this book really resonated with her because she's like, wait a minute, because the kids kind of were having a debate what the story was about. And they thought that the mom went on vacation. They thought that she was getting babysat. But Miss Ward was like, wait a minute, this could be about foster care. And so that really opened some really interesting and meaningful conversation with her because sometimes kids have a lot of feelings and they don't know how to express them. But a book that doesn't have any pictures, not only does it help with their vocabulary, but it helps them deal with some of the social and emotional stuff that they're going through. Because, you know, what better than having a cat? What better than having a flower that needed a little love in a safe place? And what better with sharing, you know, your journey and your story with other people? So it was really nice. And they loved the book. And I really wish I could show more of like the conversations, because it was really some big conversations with little people. Because a lot of times they don't know what's going on. They didn't know when their parents are coming back. Some of their parents may never come back. But having a book to connect it, having someone else to love you and to help water you and help you grow was amazing. So it was a really good book and they enjoyed it. And I always asked them, is it a thumbs up or a thumbs down? And they all gave the book a thumbs up, and they're the hardest critics. So, and Miss Ward liked it also, and she really appreciated it because her story was finally being told. So it was great and we really loved it. And I would love to share it with more families that we work with and also other foster families, because it's really good to have something to tell your story and done in a well way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. That's really wonderful. And, you know, what I was so sort of struck by in this book was that it portrayed a relative caregiver, because there aren't many relative caregivers that are being portrayed in children's literature. So it feels really special that Mrs. Ward sort of saw herself in this character, and that the kids did too. So that's really great. Tell me if you had any ahas or surprises, or if Miss Ward had any surprises in reading this book with her children.
I think the biggest surprise is I think she kind of thought that there were going to be words eventually, like as we went through the book. But I said, the kids, there aren't any words, Miss Ward. And the kids are like, they're like, Big Mama, we are the words. So I think that was like the aha. And then also having the little cat, because like the youngest of the children is just 2. And he's like, oh, I find the cat. So like having, you know, a character to follow through the journey, or like picking up things. And one of the kids said that we were talking about the apartments or the towers. I think someone mentioned earlier, he's like, well, I used to live in an apartment. So I think that it was connecting on different levels. And the fact that the book was multicultural was good also, because a lot of times children don't see themselves represented in books. You know, they see characters that may not look like them, or they may see characters that look like them, but they're, you know, only portrayed in a certain way. But this was like kind of a normal, you know, a little kid that goes to the store that's growing flowers. So yeah, definitely. And also, as they mentioned, the rainbows, I know during the pandemic, that was something that her children did. They put rainbows in the window. So that was another thing that connected them to something they know. So I think that it was, as I said before, it was very relatable. And I like when children can connect with books on, concrete levels, like stuff that they know, because sometimes books, they're like, well, we don't get it, but they really kind of got it. So, and I really think the biggest aha was Miss Ward swore there was going to be a word somewhere. So she was very cute with that. So I said, no, it's a wordless book. So I think that was a great.
That's awesome. I really, one of the things I love about this book is this appeal across such a broad age group, that, it's both a wordless book, which may imply that it is simple and easy to read, but there's so many complex images and relationships and issues being explored. So it's really exciting to know that such a wide age group of kids, found this book accessible. Thank you so much, Jen. I'm going to sort of shift a little bit and ask Monica to tell us a little bit about the community in which Miss Ward lives of West Philadelphia, and why families in this community might rely on caregivers like Mrs. Ward, and tell us a little bit more about the context of her life and family and caregiving.
Sure. So our area of West Philadelphia is predominantly African American, but we're seeing a strong immigrant population moving in, most notably from the Caribbean. So Haiti, Jamaica, Barbados, and the West Indies. And then we have a growing number of African immigrants in the area. This area is, I would consider, a food desert. The small little supermarkets that we have in the area, you don't necessarily want to frequent. We have a high crime area, and most particularly a high dropout rate with very few resources for these families. And so these families use caregivers like Miss Ward for a couple of different reasons. One could be a cultural and a linguistic match, especially with our immigrant population. And also with that immigrant population, there's a distrust of anyone is connected with any type of government organization, or, and they even look at regulated childcares in that way. And then another benefit of the relative neighbor care in this particular area is our returning people that are returning from incarceration. And so with a regulated childcare, their record might bar them from going on trips or coming in and reading to the children, or, having that parent child interaction, those bonds that are formed, and they don't have that issue with a relative neighbor provider. They can go on trips, they can come in and they can read to the children. They don't need a background check. And then with the immigrant population, a lot of the parents are undocumented, but they have native born children. And they can't always afford what native born Americans can afford. So another benefit to that is sticking to a schedule. So a lot of these parents have very strange work schedules, and relative neighbor providers can accommodate for that. Whereas a regulated provider, might have them pay for a whole week at a time, but they only need 2 days of, service for that child. And then as far as Parent Child Plus, helping providers with their professional learning and those types of things, what we did at the beginning when we started servicing just family child care in particular, we crosswalked the STARS quality rating standards with what we were able to provide through our no-cost books and toys. And so we paired those curricular guides that the children take home to their parents. Our specialists support the providers in getting those ideas and materials and activities linked to the books and toys. And then they provide support for the parent and the family for outreach and engagement. And all of those things satisfy the standard of partnership with families and communities. And so with a licensed provider, we might use the FECers, but with a person like Ms. Ward, we would use the Parent-Child Plus caregivers interaction scale. And that way we're helping the provider to kind of look at what they already do that's working well, and take that and kind of scaffold on top of it and give them some additional tools in their toolbox. I looked up actually the CCW subsidy, because with our relative neighbor providers, we try to convince them in some way, shape, form, or fashion that, maybe you might want to get regulated, and here's the reason why. And so for a Star One provider in Philadelphia, for an infant, they would get paid $36 a day, which if the infant is there 10 hours a day, you're still talking $3.60 an hour. But a relative neighbor provider is only getting $15.07 a day for that same child. So now you're talking $1.50 an hour. So financially, it might help them to become regulated. And then thinking about the Miss Wards of our area, most of them are over 50. And so do they really want to jump into becoming a licensed provider and having to go through formal professional development, getting certificates, dealing with license and inspection, the health department, etc.? Or do they just want to have fun with kids? And Jen and I talk about that all the time. Can we just have fun with the kids?
Great. Thank you, Monica. That's really helpful. And I just really appreciate your kind of giving us context of this community, but also really unpacking some of the different reasons why families choose to use relative and neighbor providers. Today, Parent-Child Plus and Homegrown have a little paper that we are releasing. We'll drop it in the chat that really kind of investigates more both this relationship between, what families want and need for themselves based on their work or their cultural preferences, and how family, friend, and neighbor providers support that, but also really sort of underpinning this, the key here around community and sort of these loving, interactions that relative caregivers have with the children that they support, and how critical that is for young child development and success, but also that there are incredible programs across the country like Parent-Child Plus that have resources and incredible staff that are really prepared to support caregivers wherever they are on that journey and regardless of their desire to become regulated. So we will drop that paper in the chat. It looks like Karen has put that in the chat. I will also now just open it up if there are any other questions for Monica, for Jen, for Isabel, for Amy. We'd love to take a question or two if there are any burning questions. Rosa had a comment in the Q&A. She's from Hartford. She's a child care home provider. She said the book is interesting and useful for children. It helps with social emotional development and makes an important contribution to a child's life. From an early age, they're in contact with nature, giving them an opportunity to be friends with it, increasing chances that tomorrow they'll be a caregiver and defender of the environment. A really lovely sentiment that really does come through in the book. If there are other questions, we'd love to take another question or two. So another question that it looks like was asked by Maria is if there's a way to receive additional information or materials for families and providers in vulnerable communities. And just encourage, Maria will follow up with you directly. We're happy to connect you with other partners that Homegrown works with across the country that may have some of these resources. There's a question here about how can you order the book, and I'm going to ask Amy or Isabel to drop a link. Oh, actually, Vinette, would you mind going to the next slide, because we have the Bookvine website and toll-free number that you can call to order the book or order an additional copy. Any home-based childcare provider that registered for the event today will receive and was able to share their address will receive a free copy of the book. We've sent out several of the books already, and some are still coming. So we hope that you get your copy and enjoy it. And see if there are any other questions or any other comments from the panel that you'd like to add at this time. Isabel, I think you're on mute. Go ahead.
I loved listening to Jen talk about Miss Ward. It just, because, you know, we deal with the books all the time, but we don't necessarily have that intimate kind of experience. And so that's what it's all about. And how wonderful to have Miss Ward, and how wonderful to have Jen supporting her. It's great. Renews everything.
Yep, it's really lovely to hear about it. All right, well, it does not appear that we have any more questions, or maybe we do have a few coming in here. Lots of, endorsement of that comment from Isabel. Before we wrap up today, we have a homegrown survey that we are currently fielding. We will drop the link in English and in Spanish in the chat. We'd love to hear from you, via the survey. If you did not, if you want to contact us about, the status of your book, you can use this email address here. And, we really hope that this book will be a joy to you and the children that you care for, and that you can, also share it with providers that you may work with who, can also enjoy it in just the way that Jen and Mrs. Ward did as well. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you so much to Amy and Isabel for partnering with us to share these books with partners throughout the country. And thank you so much to Jen and Monica for sharing your experience and for, sharing the experience that you had with Mrs. Ward in using this book. We're so thankful for your contributions, and are really thrilled to work so closely with Parent Child Plus to support relative and neighbor providers. Thank you all so much. If you're able to take the survey, we would love that. If you haven't got your book, you should expect to get it within the next, week or so. But feel free to email us, and we can certainly give you a status update. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Natalie. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.